Hey guys, this is JimJamzzz. Just wanted to make a video on my Flying Bear list. It's the list that I was running with the Race to S rank for about 14 hours. So I got a few requests for the deck list when I was doing that. It's the deck list I've been running almost exclusively for a couple of months now that I managed to get to top 10 in S rank this month, which was the aim at the start of the month. So I just wanted to at this stage go through the refined list, what I picked for the list, what's excluded from the list, the reasons that it works, and the way that it works. Just sort of as a precursor, it's probably not the most powerful Fey list at the moment that, goes to, I think it's either Styx or Solifid's sort of value minion deck, if you will. It's a super fun list though that is extremely viable and is probably in that sort of B tier at the moment. It will take games off good players though, and if you draw well, it will beat basically any deck. So to start you off, we start with Snow Chaser. The reason I included Snow Chaser was because obviously it's a Vespyr unit. Also, once you get it into infiltrate range, it is extremely good value. Also in the early game, it is a good way to use that sort of leftover 1 mana. The reason I haven't included more than one is because if you can't get into infiltrate range, it's not a particularly good unit, and in the late game, you really don't want to be top decking too many of these guys because they will lose you games. The next unit is Boran Bear, which a lot of people thought I was memeing with when I first started to use it. The reason that it's essential in this list is because you can only include 3 Crystal Cloakers, obviously, and that Dryad synergy with that early 2-drop is what sets up a lot of your wins and a lot of the games. So Boran Bear sits in there nicely, plus it's just really fun when you have a 15 damage Boran Bear running around causing havoc. Next is Crystal Cloakers. Absolute no-brainer, must include 3. Probably the best and most consistent Vespyr unit. Next we have 2 Hearth Sisters. You still need them for, obviously, the fact that you need to round out having the 2-drops. And with your BBS, they can obviously be extremely high value. They're the kind of unit that you really dislike having to play on your first drop because it doesn't actually have any synergy. But it's better than playing nothing. But it's a bit of a no-brainer, and 2 in the deck is more than enough for me. Next we have Glacial Elemental, which synergizes extremely well with Bone Chill. It also just sort of adds to that sort of early game trading damage and will set up a lot of tempo plays, especially on your second turn, just for clearing out those initial 2 minions that the enemy generals placed. Next we have Dryad, which is the real core of the deck. It's what gives the deck its flavor, if you will. It allows you to get most things into infiltrate range and also take out any sort of backline threats. It synergizes fantastically with any Vespyr unit, but especially something with like Arctic Displacer for that sort of flying 11 damage. The next is Saberspine Tiger. If you manage to get your unit into infiltrate range and then add a Wailing Host on top, as well as your BBS and face damage from your general, you're looking at 12 out of hand damage a turn, which will win you a lot of games. So that's in there just as a closer and sort of an emergency, oh god, he's dropped an Iron Cliff and I have no other way to remove it sort of thing. Next is Snow Rippler. The reason that I include Snow Rippler is 1, it helps you mill cards a little bit, so occasionally it will sort of provide that draw that you need. And second, going as player 2 is an extreme disadvantage for this list. There aren't that many good plays for the second spot for a Vespyr list, and so being able to place it and then something like a Vespyr Call over the top to round out that sort of 4 mana play can be extremely helpful. Next I run 2 Sisters. Welcome to run whatever sort of draw that you like in that slot. Every type of draw just has a slightly different play style. So Sisters are slightly more control, slower based, but it's what I like to run. So feel free to swap that out with any of your other draw options though. Next we have Arctic Displacer, which is basically a really big finisher. Sometimes I'll run 1 in that slot instead of the 2. And actually run the second, it's sort of my flex spot, as a tech spot. So in relation to what's being run in the meta and if I'm coming across the same deck over and over and over. So if I'm seeing a lot of swarm decks, for instance, I'll go a secondary Frostburn. If I need more late game threat, I'll go one of the higher end Vespyr units. or if I'm really struggling to get that sort of early game dominance, then I'll run a real strong early game damage threat in there. Last but not least, we have Dark Nemesis, which is a really cool sort of finisher and also a must-answer card. What will end up happening often is with things like your Glacial Elementals, your Dryads, you'll really be running the enemy general all over the map. So being able to place something like a Dark Nemesis in a corner, you're basically saying if you don't answer this, you lose the game. The other good thing about it is that it'll drag the opposition back into infiltrate range if they've managed to, which they often will in the mid to late game, move their way out of infiltrate range. So it's a way to drag them back into that real damaging area for you when you're running things like Wailing Overdrive, for instance. So I really like it. Adds another win condition, and this list does struggle sometimes to close out that mid to late game. So Dark Nemesis is just another really good sort of late game threat for that. Next up we have 2 Aspect of the Fox, which are just extremely good removal, so bit of a no-brainer. They can also be used on your Bone Shield barriers for a cheap 3-3, or also just like panic removal. Vespyr Call is a no-brainer. I run it in some of my non-Vespyr lists too. It provides often those late game threats without actually having to run them in your deck, so you can play sort of a more early to mid-game focus. No-brainer for me. Love the card. Run 3 always. Bone Shield Barrier 2 seems to be about the sweet spot for me. They lose their usefulness a little bit in the sort of mid to late game, so I generally don't like to run 3. They synergize well with Glacial Elemental, obviously, for getting those pings off. But what they'll also do is, if you drop it and they'll often have 1 left over, you can play something like an Aspect of the Fox on top of it to get yourself an extra unit, or also a Wailing Overdrive if you're in infiltrate range, which will give you a 5-8 unit off the top of my head, which is really good just for trading anything that's sitting next to it. Next up we have Chromatic Cold. No-brainer removal, include 2, just great for those sort of backline threats. Frostfire is a fantastic value sort of spell. If you've got something like a Boran Bear and you don't get the Dryad on your second turn to get it into infiltrate range or to take out whatever the opposition general has dropped, what you can do is you can Frostfire a unit on your secondary turn, and that'll almost always trade fantastically with whatever the other general has dropped on their first turn. So it's just another really sort of strong opening combo that allows you to get tempo on the board and sort of control the game. Aspect of the Drake is next. This is a 1 of tech card that has sort of a lot of uses throughout the game. It's handy mid to late game at any stage. So a mid game use would be on something like a Bone Shield barrier to then add the versatility of flying to everything else around it. A late game use that's really handy is if you've got a Dark Nemesis that you've placed in a corner, often you'll struggle to get that Dark Nemesis into attack range of the general. So we can drop something like a Snow Chaser next to it, Aspect of the Drake on top of the Snow Chaser, and that Dark Nemesis becomes a flying 8-12 damage unit, whatever it's up to. So that'll actually help you close out quite a few games. Then we have Cryo, which is a nerfed spell, obviously. What you want to do with that is just play it slightly later on our curve than you would have previously. So now with the cost of the spell, if you run it too early in the game, you'll actually lose board control. So it's great as a panic removal, and also that sort of mid to late game, obviously mill and removal. So play it, it's still an entirely playable card, you'll just want to play it slightly later on your curve. Next we have Wailing Overdrive, which is probably one of the most underrated cards in the game. It's basically your thumping wave and will surprise a lot of players. So what we'll want to do in the mid game with the tempo and the control is to focus on playing those early game units. Then in the mid game, we'll basically buff the units to make them more difficult to remove. What will end up happening is the enemy general will trade unfavorably with those units and also use up all their dispels. Then we'll want to go into our Arctic Displacer Dark Nemesis sort of stage of the game, which is just about those big one hits to close out games. Last but not least, we have Frostburn. A really great card, but I only run it as a one-of. The reason for that is that if you're using it, you're going to be using it for one of 2 reasons. 1, you've lost board control, in which case you're probably going to lose anyway. And 2, if you're running against something like a Wall or a Swarm deck, or just even something like a Reaver with a lot of backline threats, so things like Kyber Holders, It's great at removing those sort of threats. So really great as a one-of, but I kind of find that if I'm running two of them, I've basically lost the game already. So I generally like to stick to the one. If I am facing a lot of Swarm or Wall decks though, I will actually switch it out for that Arctic Displacer spot. So that's the deck, guys. It's a Flying Bear deck. It's a lot of fun, and it is extremely viable, if not top tier. If you'd like to see some sort of gameplay of it against other S-rank players, let me know. I'll get onto that as well. But give it a try, see how you go, and it is the kind of deck that rewards sort of long-term use. You will get better at using it, and you will see yourself improve with it over time. So stick at it, have fun, and yeah, thanks guys.